Shavua Tov Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Sheviit. We're up to Perek Gimel Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnah should be Le'ilu Nishmat Neria ben Svelana Aranbai Menuchato Began Eden. Amen. Rabotai, today's Mishnah is going to bring us more cases where a person is allowed to remove the stones from his field on Shemitah because he doesn't intend to clear the field for cultivation, and he's not even going to be suspected of having such an intent. Avanim shezizatan hamacharesha. If one has stones in his field that were loosened from the ground by the plow, and the Rab explains that when the field was plowed in the 6th year, the plow weakened the attachment between the stones and the ground, and the stones are going to become completely loose the next time he plows the field in the 8th year. But the Rav says that the same halacha applies to the stones that weren't loosened yet at all, but they will be loosened when the field is plowed again. In either case, the next plowing is going to make the stones much looser. Or shayu mechusot v'nitgalu, or stones that had been covered with earth but were uncovered by the plow, though they weren't loosened, they were just uncovered. And the Rab explains that these stones were partially uncovered by the first plowing and will become completely uncovered by the next plowing. Therefore, here it's going to be easier to remove the stones when the field is plowed again. If among them there are 2 stones, each of which is a load for 2 men, the halacha is that all the stones in the field that were loosened or uncovered can be removed from the field on Shemitah based on 2 considerations. Number 1, the 2 large stones that each is a load for 2 men, they are sized using construction. Therefore, people will assume that at least these stones are being used for construction purposes instead of clearing the field for plowing. And number 2, when you remove any of the stones, even the small ones, it's going to be easier after the plow goes over them again in the 8th year, and it'll loosen or uncover them completely. So the fact that you're removing them now, even though you have extra effort involved, because then the next time when you plow in the 8th year it's going to be easier, that shows that you need them for construction despite their small size. And the fact that you have both these combinations, you're allowed to remove not only the large stones, but all the stones that are going to be loosened or uncovered. Because again, Rabotai, it's going to be easier to remove these small stones next year in the 8th year when you plow. So the fact that you're removing them now, even though it'll take extra work, shows that I'm not removing it for the field, I'm removing it for construction purposes. Now the Mishnah is going to continue talking about stones that are completely loose. If a person clears his field from stones that are lying in layers on the surface of the field, he takes those that are on top, but he has to leave those that are touching the ground. Why? We don't want it to appear that you're preparing the ground for planting. Likewise, if there is a pile of pebbles or a heap of stones, you take those that are on top, but you have to leave those that touch the ground. However, if there's a layer of rock or straw under them, all of them can be removed, even those at the bottom of the pile, because the area below it is not fit for planting anyways. There's either straw or, like we said, a layer of rock. Now, the Mefarshim explained to us that in all these cases, you are only allowed to remove the stones if your intent is to use them. If your purpose is to improve the land, that will not allow you to remove any of the stones. That is in Rabotai of Mishnah Zayin. Mishnah Chet is going to discuss a case of work that one is not allowed to do before Shemitah because it seems like you're preparing for working the land on Shemitah. En bonin madregot al pi hageayot erev Sheviit mishipasku hageshamim. In the year before Shemitah, after the rainy season is over, a person is not allowed to build steps down to ravines where rainwater is collected. The Mefarshim explain that the Rab tells us farmers would draw water from a deep, narrow valley with steep sides to irrigate their fields. They would build steps to make it easier for them to climb up and down the side of these deep, narrow valleys. So the Mishnah is telling us you are not allowed to build the steps down to these deep, narrow valleys where the rainwater is collected. Why? Because it appears like you're preparing the steps to gather water to irrigate your field on Shemitah, which we know irrigating your field on Shemitah is a sul. So in the summer, after the rainy season is over, not enough water generally remains in this deep, in this deep, narrow valley where the rainwater is collected to irrigate the crop of that year. So there'd be no point in building steps down to this area except for the sake of collecting rainwater that's going to fall the next year, which in this case is Shemitah, because the rainy season is over already. But on Shemitah itself, after the rainy season is over, you're allowed to build these steps. Because now it's evident that you're preparing these steps for the purpose of watering your field in the next year after Shemitah. Now, the Mishnah is going to deal with now building a dam in this deep, narrow valley on Shemitah to stop the water from flowing out. You're not allowed to fortify the dam with earth, meaning even after the rainy season on Shemitah, you're not allowed to build a watertight dam of stones cemented together with earth or mortar, because people are going to think that you intend to irrigate your field with whatever water remains in this deep, narrow valley with steep sides. But you can make a barrier of stones without earth or mortar, because that's not watertight. Water will seep through. Then it's not evident that you're trying to use that water to water your field. The Mishnah now is going to conclude by teaching us that when a person is building either of these primitive structures, either the steps to this ravine after the rainy season or the barrier of stones without earth or mortar next to the field on Shemitah, you are allowed to remove stones from the field, even though removing stones is generally asur. Any stone that he's able to take by extending his hand without leaving his position, you can take such stones, because since you don't move from the position you're occupying when you're building the steps or the dam, people are going to assume that you're taking the stones for the steps or the dam. Therefore, even if the stone is small and it's not generally the size where you use for construction material, you can take it without being suspected of clearing the ground for planting. That is the end of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai La'olam. Amen v'amen.